Good morning. Well, today we're going to do book talk. I talked to somebody and somebody said, well, I can't read Korean. Okay, well, then this is an English book here for you. It's called Practical Theology and Qualitative Research. I'm going to share a screen because it's a bit involved, and it would be best that I share in the teaching format. Practical Theology and Qualitative Research by John Swinton and Harriet Mowat. This book was very important because I think it was my third or probably fourth year into PhD. I had to make a decision. Do I do qualitative research or quantitative? Because the big research question I had was, how come Cambodian churches are now not becoming financially independent? Or how come all the church plants in Cambodia are not self-sustainable? Unlike churches that I helped plant in Siberia, 27 of them, I don't find too many Cambodian church plants becoming self-sustainable. So struggling with that, I really thought it was the economic theory issue. So I read a lot of literature review on economics and realized that no, probably not economics, probably more relational, probably more patron-client. So now I have to look into socioanthropology. If so, then I have to do an interview, or do I? Do I do quantitative or qualitative? So I used close to 300 books for my PhD, and this is one of them. And you go through books like water in those days, but during that period. But there's a book that kind of grabs you, as you could tell. I thoroughly read it. The title is Practical Theology and Qualitative Research. My first reading of that was 2010. Wow. So it wasn't 3 years. It was actually 2 years after my starting. And I finished in 2011 May. And I started reading this this week. And, it was wonderful, wonderful read. John Swinton is from University of Aberdeen. And I know Aberdeen because my external examiner was a professor of philosophy there. He writes a book, What is Practical Theology? What is Qualitative Research? And I basically avoid entire section of practical theology because my motivation is not about that, okay? It's not about practical theology. I'm more concerned with qualitative research and how do I answer the missiological question I had? What is the role of Korean missionary, or why do Cambodian church plants with Korean missionaries do not become self-sustainable? These are missiological questions that has to be answered by qualitative research, not quantitative. The intention of the book, Swinton writes, this book is not intended to be the textbook on qualitative research. The primary purpose of this book is to address the question, how can we faithfully use qualitative research to provide accurate data for, in his mind, theological reflection, in my mind, missiological reflection from socio-anthropological perspective. So when I found this book, I said, Eureka, I found it. And I gave myself to it. Start reading, it was right on. The significance of experience. And I go a little bit into the practical theology. What is a practical theology? Well, classical theology would be, they talk about Bible, they talk about soteriology, eschatology, the end of the world, the theology of church and theology of salvation, But practical theology actually deal with human experience. The significance experience. Practical theology takes human experience seriously. One of the things that marks practical theology out as distinctive from the other theological discipline is beginning point within human experience, right? It's sort of like the book that I'm working on right now, the Kierkegaard book. Maybe I'll do a book talk on the Kierkegaard guidebook. He says the radical change in philosophy. For over 2,000 years, philosophers had insisted their primary text was to establish what counted as certain and reliable knowledge. Soren Kierkegaard violently disagreed. The job of philosophy wasn't to tell what we could know, it had to tell us what we should do. So bring the whole knowing into existential reality. Is it real? It's great that it's right, but is it real? So same thing. The whole theological circle, of course, is always later than philosophy, unfortunately. Asking the same question, it's great that you taught us Trinity, you taught us what is church, you taught us what is salvation, but people out there, they don't give a hoot about what you're worrying about, right? So in a sense that it starts from the human experience, just like I don't debate over what is church theologically. I'm concerned that 2,650 churches in Cambodia, hardly any church are self-sustainable. So instead of arguing about the definition of what church should be, I'm simply our human experience in Cambodia, we need to contextualize. We need to come up with some kind of reasoning. And where's the data from? Well, from the field. So that's the significant. And then this book really gave me insight into that. Qualitative research, what is it? Denzin and Lincoln defines qualitative research as thus. So when you read literally 30, 40 books on certain topic, for example, I had to read through so many books on, is it qualitative or is it quantitative? I couldn't decide. So I'm reading one book. So the best way is skim and then go back to the bib and see whom they are quoting from. So the most quoted book are the most classic book. And so when we talk about Denzin and Lincoln, they are the guru of not research, but guru of defining what is qualitative and what is quantitative. So these are the expert in knowing that. So I came through a lot of Denzin and Lincoln, and when it comes to case study, right, different authors. But here, this is how he defines qualitative research. Qualitative research is multi-method in focus, involving an interpretive, naturalistic approach to subject matter. This means that qualitative research study things in their natural setting, attempting to make sense of or interpret phenomena in terms of the meaning people bring them to. So it is observing and trying to understand. Qualitative research is a process of careful, rigorous inquiry into aspects of the social world. It produces formal statement of conceptual framework that provide new way of understanding the world. Therefore, comprise knowledge that is practically useful for those who work with issues around learning and adjustment to the pressure and demands of social world. It's careful and rigorous and try to answer the question that people have. It is narrative as knowledge. And that basically settled it for me. Because Khmer is not a literature-driven society, it's narrative or storytelling. Now, qualitative research legitimatize, right, the storytelling as a data. You could interview people and then come up with that. So everyday problem for us, it was, how come Cambodian church is not self-sustainable? And then you start laying question and formulate the question, Why? How come they're not working? How come he worked in Siberia? Am I missing something? Out of this discussion, then you go into literature reading, reading about Cambodia, reading about everything about Cambodian church plan, and then thinking and discussion with small group, and then you shoot out this research question. It took me close to 2 years just to come up with research question. And then when final research question comes, then you now begin to lock down on the methodology. And I said, okay, now I'm following this book. I said, okay, I need to do this on case study. And when I do case study, not case study as one of the sample, but my whole entire methodology as case study, where I will be going in, and then I will not be part of the group, but I will become an observant. Okay, there's the difference between emic view and ethic view, and I'll be outside looking in and observing and making recording and actually make analysis. My analysis wasn't historic, not political, not contextual. It was more subculture of the organization for 15 years. And then I was able to bring all that. Role of researcher for me, I had certain approach, and I had to decide, am I going to do inductive research or deductive research? So I had to make a decision. Am I going to do deductive way, or am I going to be inductive way? What does that mean? Inductive reasoning is like this. How does inductive qualitative research work? You make observation. I start with data. I infer conclusion from my data. I tend to do qualitative research. So I make the observation and I begin to see the pattern, right? And out of the pattern that I said, okay, this is my hypothesis, right? And then out of hypothesis, I come up with a theory. That's called ID. Inductive research is done through data, okay? So, well, in key terms in Khmer, it's inductive, deductive, qualitative, quantitative. And this is part of my my master level student, and I'm trying to teach them because they are engaged in research that they have to write 80-page master thesis. So, from the Cambodian cultural context, Cambodian research made this observation. Okay, wow, when elephants fight, they notice that ants die. When elephants fight, ants die. It's just a data. Okay, so he made that observation. He came up with, and then, well, okay, let's see if it's true. He go to different location, right? Different city, different, and every time there's an elephant fight, whether it be Mondorkiri, Ratanakiri, Kampong Tam, Batambang, doesn't matter, Siem Reap, when elephant fight, well, ants seems to die. It doesn't matter, summer, fall, whether they fight Wednesday, Tuesday, whether they fight 2 p.m., 7 p.m., when elephant fights, ants seems to die. Hypothesis. Then you come up with pattern, understanding the pattern. I said, well, data based on location, gender, size, color, season of the year, days of the week, times of the week, doesn't matter. It seems that regardless of the condition of locality, environmental factors, ants are victimized by elephants fight. So that's your hypothesis. When elephants fight, ants get killed. That's Cambodian proverbs. Okay, well, Hun Sen met our Korean president and said, well, in Cambodia, when elephants fight, ants die. Well, our president said, well, Korea has same proverbs. When whales fight, shrimps dies. Right? So same thing. When China and USA fights, Korea suffers. The weaker suffer when powerful struggle, based on inductive qualitative research. So I came to the conclusion. That's how you do qualitative research. Well, what about deductive qualitative, not quantitative? Oh, quantitative. Okay. So you start with the theory. So, and you have hypothesis out of theory, and you make observation, and you basically confirm, well, that's true. I tend to do quantitative. So weaker suffer when powerful struggle. That's a theory, right? So the other guy, now someone picked up my thesis and says, wow, I wonder if Bob's theory is true. So that's a theory. So hypothesis, the weaker suffer when powerful struggle. But are elephants aware of pain and suffering they are inflicting on ants? My hypothesis that elephants are not aware. That's the hypothesis. And so he goes to interview and then survey 10,000 elephants in Cambodia. And the elephant all says, what ants? Right? Were you aware? What ants? Right? And do you throw out survey question, and said, no, and you get 10,000 elephant survey and you make an observation. Well, my hypothesis that they are not aware. What elephant fight? And you interview the ants. And the ant seems to say, what? Elephants. So there is a confirmation. An ant on its feet can do more than an elephant lying down. There will be African proverbs. So I come to conclusion that inductive starts with data, deductive starts with theory, right? So that's how I taught. And so from my PhD, learning and writing my thesis and utilizing this book, now I am writing a chapter on, I wrote a chapter on the book that I wrote for Cambodian researchers. I think this book is called Doing Research for Cambodian, something like that. Right here, Learning How to Research in Cambodia. This is a book I wrote for my CPTI students, and this is Cambodia Presbyterian Theological Institute. And I taught a course on a graduate level research class. So as a result, this book was birthed. Amen. Well, I hope I didn't bore you, maybe, but actually, I'm doing this because one of the PhD student right now is struggling with that. He's Korean, so I'll be doing this book talk in Korean as well, so you could actually get to see. I hope I could be helpful. I think research is important because we need to not do same thing continuously and expect different result. Einstein said that was definition of stupidity. So if Cambodia last 20 years planted, or CPTI planted 160 churches and none are self-sustainable, then we better stop and ask the question, what are we doing wrong? How can we improve? We need to do the research. Lord bless you. I'll see you tomorrow, Sunday. Bye.